Hello everyone, welcome back to ESL DRILL. In today's video, let's discuss this village named Ponnimanthuri. Ponnimanthuri village in India. That's from Kolkata. But before we get into the lesson, let me tell you a few things about this Ponnimanthuri village. This village in India is another place that became a victim of industrialization. The leather factories that were allowed to be set up in the village released many poisonous chemicals during the process called tanning. Now the villagers are facing severe problems. One of the villagers named Vijayasama narrates how it happened. Let's see that now. Let me read this paragraph. "I can remember the time," she said wistfully, "when all the fields around this village were green and the harvests good." Her outstretched arm described a complete circle as she stood in the morning sun. "Then they built those monsters." Those. Her voice spluttered in anger as she shook her fist at a collection of ominous-looking black buildings on the horizon, covered in a low-lying shroud of thick smoke. "They said that factories need leather to make shoes, handbags, and clothes. They said our menfolk would get jobs. They said we would all become rich." You can understand the woman's anguish. Let's see that. Here, she explains all these things wistfully. She says, "I can remember the time when all the fields around this village were green and the harvest good." How does she say this? She says this wistfully. It means in a sad tone, sadly. She is very sad. And she says that she still remembers the time when all the fields around the village, Ponnimanthuri village, were green and the harvests good. Harvest here means crops. And there were good crops. People were really happy and every field was green. She says that she remembers the time. And when she said this, her outstretched arm described a complete circle. So what is outstretched here? It means stretched out to full length. You know what arm is. So she stretched out her arm and then she described a complete circle. It means she moved her arm in a circle to describe that everything around was green and the harvest crops were really good. Look at what she said. "Then they built those monsters." Now here, monsters are those factories that she was talking about. Here they refers to the factory owners. The factory owners, they built those monsters. So generally monsters have a different meaning. Here monsters are something that cause a lot of danger. Now here these factories were the things that caused this danger here. And those, she said, when she said those, her voice spluttered in anger. Let's look at the meaning of the word splutter. Splutter means speak quickly and with difficulty because you are angry. She said, "Then they built those monsters, those." She was really angry. And she shook her fist. So shook, shake, shook, shaken. She moved her fist at a collection of ominous-looking black buildings. So what is fist? I think most of you know it very well. So you can have a look at the picture on the screen. Fist is a hand when it is tightly closed with the fingers bent into the palm. So you bend your fingers into the palm and that's called fist. And her fist was shaking, moving. And she shook her fist at a collection of ominous-looking black buildings. Let's look at the word ominous-looking. This one actually comes from ominous, so suggesting that something bad is going to happen. Now, the black buildings were those factories that the people built. And those factories were something that suggested that there was something bad that was going to happen. And where were these black buildings? They were on the horizon. Look at this word horizon. Horizon is the line at which the earth's surface and the sky appear to meet. See, for example, if you go outside where there are no buildings, you see a place where the sky and the earth seem to be joining. They seem to be meeting at a place. That is called horizon. And on the horizon, on the outskirts of the village, these factories were there. And look at this here. The horizon was covered in a low-lying shroud of thick smoke. Let's look at the word shroud here. That's something that hides or covers something. That place was almost covered with thick smoke. Where was the smoke coming from? The smoke was coming from the factories there. And Vijayasama said this. They said that factories need leather to make shoes, handbags and clothes. Here they again refers to the factory owners. And she also said this. They said our menfolk would get jobs. They said we would all become rich. These were the false promises made by the factories. The factory owners tricked them into allowing them to establish factories there, to set up factories there. They said that all the menfolk would get jobs. What is the meaning of menfolk? That's the men in the family. So in any family, all the men in the families of the village would get jobs. That was the promise made by the factory owners. And they also assured that these people would all become rich. Okay, that's how it started. Let's move to the next part. Let me read this. We stood silent, each thinking our own thoughts. Yes, they told you all that. But there is so much they didn't tell you. They didn't tell you that to change animal skins into leather, which they call tanning, uses as many as 250 different chemicals, including heavy metals such as cadmium, arsenic, and chromium. They didn't tell you that these chemicals are discharged into the environment from those chimney stacks and fall to earth for miles around, polluting the earth below. They didn't tell you that this would poison your fields so that nothing will ever grow. Now, we stood silent, each thinking our own thoughts. The villagers said this. Yes, they told you all that, but there is so much that the factory owners did not tell you, tell the villagers. Look at this repetition of they didn't tell you, they didn't tell you. This suggests that they felt that pain. And to change animal skins into leather, they needed a process called tanning. And that tanning process uses as many chemicals as 250. And it includes the process, the chemicals include heavy metals such as cadmium, arsenic and chromium. So if you want to know more about these heavy metals called cadmium, arsenic and chromium, so you can see them on the screen. So I'll have them displayed for 10 seconds. Okay. The factory owners didn't tell them that these chemicals are discharged into the environment. They didn't tell. So what they told them was that they would get a lot of money, they would get jobs, and they would all become rich. But they didn't tell them about the ill effects or disadvantages of the establishment of the factories there. And look at this here. The chemicals are discharged into the environment from those chimney stacks. Look at this here. Chimney stack is the tall chimney of a building such as a factory which lets smoke and other things go out, especially smoke. And these chemicals are discharged into the atmosphere through the chimney stacks. And these chemicals or this waste would fall onto the earth for miles around and it would pollute the earth below. But they didn't tell you that this would poison their fields. They didn't tell you that this would poison your fields, so nothing will grow. This is what is happening right now. Nothing is growing there. But the factory owners did not tell them that these bad consequences would happen in future. No, they didn't. Let's move to the next part. They didn't tell us that the chemicals would be dumped in open fields and into our rivers, sighed Vijayasama. We had been thinking the same thoughts. They didn't tell us that our women would have to walk 10 kilometers every day. They didn't tell us that we would get ulcer and sores on our bodies. They didn't tell us. Her voice trailed off. There is so much they didn't tell you, I thought. We don't buy leather shoes or leather handbags or leather clothes, she said. Now let's look at this here. They didn't tell us that the chemicals would be dumped in open fields. So let's look at the word dump. Dump, that's a verb, which means get rid of something you do not want. It means to throw away, especially in a place that is not suitable. Now, this is the place where they were living, the villagers were living. That's inhabited place. And these chemicals and waste should not be dumped into those fields. That's not suitable place. But they did that. They dumped all these chemicals. They threw away all these chemicals into the open fields and into the rivers, sighed Vijayasama. Let's look at the word sigh here. To take and then let out a long deep breath that can be heard to show that you are disappointed or sad or tired, etc. Here, she is disappointed and she is sad. So sigh is this one. I think you heard the sound. That's sighing. And they didn't tell us that a woman would have to walk 10 kilometers every day. Now, the current situation in Ponnimanthuri village in India is that the villagers would have to walk 10 kilometers every day to get firewood or drinking water. And they didn't tell us that we would get ulcer and sores on our bodies. Let's look at those here. Ulcer is a sore area on your skin inside your body that may bleed or produce poisonous substances. So it might be inside of the skin, sometimes on the skin. Let's look at the word sores here. Sore, a painful infection on your body. The factory owners never told them that these people would get ulcers and sores on their bodies in future. They didn't tell us. They didn't tell us. When Vijayasama said this, her voice trailed off. Let's look at that phrasal verb, trail off. It means when you talk about somebody's speech, you use this phrasal verb. It means become gradually quieter and then stop. So voice becoming gradually quieter and then completely stop. She said, they didn't tell us. There is so much they didn't tell you. And look at this here, the last two lines. We don't buy leather shoes or leather handbags or leather clothes, she said. Now the idea is that these people were very poor and then they couldn't afford to buy these shoes and leather items, leather handbags. They wouldn't need all these things, but they were the ones who received the punishment for something they don't need. Okay, that's the end of this lesson. I hope you have understood whatever I have explained here. If there is anything that you would like to ask, you can do the same thing in the comment section below this video. And if you have really liked this, hit that like button, share this video, and don't forget to subscribe if you are new here. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in my next video.